Hello everyone, my name is Peter Gilbert and I'm judging the July contest for the Dallas Camera Club. As an introduction here, you may notice my accent is a little different from most folks around North Texas. I have a southern accent, it's from South Australia, so I hope you can understand me. I'm retired now. I spent 40 years working in the oil industry, in downstream industry as we call it, refining and marketing. So I'm a chemical engineer by trade. I've been involved in photography for more than 50 years. I started basically when I was around 14, I guess, with my first camera, and I got serious, I suppose, when I started my career after graduating, probably in the early, actually 1968, I guess. I've been involved with wet darkrooms through the 1990s. I built my own darkroom back in the 70s. I did both color negative and black and white, made Ciberchromes, and I started off in digital probably in the early 2000s. I guess I can remember Photoshop 7, if that's a way of dating digital photographers, I guess. I'm a member of the Herd Nature Photography Group in McKinney. I actually coordinate the annual photo contest that the club runs for the museum. I'd like to encourage members of the Dallas Camera Club to kind of consider entering this competition. It's a nature competition, so no hand of man. As you might expect then, my interests in photography are nature with macro, not super close-ups necessarily. I've done a little bit of that, messed around with some of these stacking programs a bit, but mostly things like insects, dragonflies and butterflies, this sort of thing. And I'm also keen on black and white photography. At the moment I'm using both small, medium and large camera systems. I have a Sony mirrorless system, but I only use manual focus Leica mount lenses, Voigtlander lenses, and I have a Nikon FX camera, D700, and pretty much all prime lenses with those as well. And I have a medium format camera, Hasselblad, again prime lenses. So I'm into more kind of tripod, contemplative type of photography rather than your street shooter, city type photographer. Okay, I'm going to comment as requested on the beginners entries, projected images, with a short commentary on each one of those. The first image I'm going to consider is the Bluebonnet Trails, Ennis, Texas. The first thing that struck me about this was it's not clear to me what the actual subject is. It could be, the flowers on the opposite bank. There's a few distractions in this. First of all, the overall white balance to me seems a little off. The flags, red, especially on the Texas flag, is a bit of a distraction. So I'm not sure whether the subject is the water, the reflections, the flowers, or the bridge. So I think the point of view needs to be changed to tighten up a bit on that one. The next image is entitled Autumn. This image to me, when I first looked at it, it struck me as if it had been in the film days, it would have been shot through a Coke and tobacco filter. I can sort of see the effect that the photographer was looking for here with the warm sort of fall colours. But, putting a filter, presumably it was done in post, kind of, changes everything, and not to the better, I don't think. The other thing, you can't see the feet of the figure of the person there. There seems to be some sort of a reflection in the foreground, which I found a little distracting. So I think the intention photographer is quite evident, but I think the use of that filter and that distracting reflection kind of detracted from the image some. The next image is entitled Screw Auger Falls. The first thing that grabbed my attention here was it appears to be over sharpened. It looks a bit crunchy. I guess that's my personal bias. It's the sort of thing that I noticed being an engineer, I guess. I think it's a pleasant enough scene. If it was me, I would have cropped out the right-hand side. That cleft in the rock is a bit distracting. And I think there's a little too much foreground there. I know the water patterns and texture is kind of interesting, but If the focus is the falls itself, I think there's a little too much foreground, so I would crop some of that out. The next image is entitled Nature's Design. It's a pleasant enough photograph. I think there's possibly a little too much on the right hand side here. I guess if you've got a clump of flowers, pink flowers like this, it's always a good idea to try to get some sort of a cohesive pattern in the shot rather than sort of having a random sort of array like this. If you crop the right hand side and then that extreme left side is like a flower cut, if you crop that out, you might have some sort of a C pattern, or at least some sort of a pattern in there which might give the picture a little bit more interest. Next we have a photograph entitled Yellow, and it is very much so. In fact, I think too much so. It seems to be oversaturated. I suspect that it was boosted a little bit in post. It's not sharp enough for my liking. I think compositionally it's simple and quite graphic, so it works on that level. But I think there's not enough sort of internal detail within the flower itself. It's kind of blown out. So I think if it was sharper and less saturated, it would have been a lot more effective. Spring poppies. This is a kind of a classic, iconic shot here, I guess. I'm always reminded of George Lapp when I see pictures like this. You're looking for backlit, translucent poppies from a low angle. There's a little bit too much foreground in this for my liking, and not quite enough luminosity in the flowers, and the trees, bare trees in the background, are a little distracting. So it's obvious what the intention was, but I think a different field of view or point of view from the camera angle would have served better. I don't know whether the sky could be a little darker with a little bit more detail in it as well. The Sunbathers is an interesting black and white shot. I think this could be improved by cropping off the right hand side. The second thing I guess that grabbed my attention after looking at the lady in the window, and she stands out well from the dark background there, so that's quite nice. But that black drain pipe kind of grabs your attention and cuts the photograph in two. So I would crop the right hand side just inside that drain pipe. I would also crop the bottom off just under the area where those words dairy and supply are. Need that part at the bottom, and I would maybe crop down on the top a little bit too. Then you would get a much more rectangular image and contrast the lady in the window with the other one on the left, which is blank. That sort of gives a bit more tension and maybe a bit more interest. The image Next, Week Out Skinny is kind of a intriguing shot in one sense. I think there's a little bit too much of the empty space, negative space on the left. I can sort of see where you're trying to contrast and get some background in there and dimension maybe. It kind of makes me want to see a bit more of the sign. I don't know. I think I can sort of see where you were going with this. To be quite honest, this is not the sort of image that kind of grabs me. Doesn't float my boat very much. It's well executed in the sense that it's sharp and exposure is okay. But I would tend to crop out a little bit on the left and maybe move the camera to the right a bit to actually sort of see more of that sign. Next, we have the image Wyoming Light. This is an interesting image. The lighting is quite dramatic. I guess you're reminded of the kind of compositional issues here that our eye is drawn to. I should say impact issues. Our eye is drawn to warm over cool, light over dark, and near over far, and sharp over unsharp. Considering all of that, the focal point of this image, to my way of thinking, is that rock outcrop 90-degree elbow, which is in the top right quadrant, and it's contrasted nicely with the dark background of the range behind. So in order to kind of draw the eye a little bit more and focus more on that, I would tend to crop out a bit of the foreground, which is a bit empty. So cropping maybe 1/3 of the bottom of the image, I think, would strengthen it. Here comes the sun. Well, this is very contrasty, which of course gives it some impact right away. However, it's a bit too contrasty. There's perhaps not enough detail in that chair on the right-hand foreground. I'd like to see, a bit more detail there. Also, the kind of receding line of the railing is a bit too close to the center of the image for my way of thinking. I think it might be improved by cropping a bit off the left and just a tiny bit off the top, and then I would darken the sky so we can actually see more detail. There obviously seems to be some detail in clouds there. It's pretty well blown out. The first thing I thought of when I looked at this image was, matrix exposure. So the idea is to have you run the camera, not the other way around. So the drooping flower, it's quite an effective image. I think the one thing that kind of distracts from it is that the background is a little bit light. I mean, I think applying a vignette around that and maybe lightening up the interesting kind of center part of the flower would sort of give it more drama and kind of draw your eye in more to that. So your subject matter here is darker than the background, which tends to kind of let the eye drift off into that lighter background, as I made a comment on an earlier image. The image of the Hunt Bridge, Calatrava cables, is very nice. I really like the clean blue and white on this. It's nice exposure and very good white balance on this, so that's excellent. Compositionally, I think the eye is obviously drawn way to the top of the image. Then the issue is, well, where do you go from there? You sort of come back down the cables, or do you stay stuck at the top of the image? And for me, I kind of stayed stuck at the top. So raising the camera slightly and maybe completing that curve, if possible, might have added a bit more interest to it. The other thing that I saw, and maybe I'm being very picky here, is that there's a tiny dot in the extreme upper left-hand corner, which could easily have been cloned out. So I guess the lesson is always look at the edges of your image and fix any distractions there. The image Bird Bliss, kind of like this. There are nice expressions on the birds' faces. I like the fact that the one on the left is looking right at the camera, and the other one has got that kind of expression my dog gets when he's lying out in the sun. It's just like soaking up the sun. And the name of the image kind of reflects that. Maybe the white is a little too hot. Highlights, it might have been Kerr's adjustment, or in Lightroom maybe an adjustment brush to burn in the white a little bit. The tail of the guy on the right is kind of clipped a bit, so it would have been, if you did crop in on this, it might have been better to leave a bird there. I think the fact that their beaks are kissing is a great point. It kind of brings a unity to it. So overall, that's a nice image. I like that. The image, Wait a Minute, I gave this the honourable mention. It's obviously got a great focal point with that eye looking right at you. It's like a target with a nice catchlight in it. So obviously that's great impact in that point of view. It's not quite sharp throughout. I think it might be improved with a kind of darkening the edges a little bit to kind of again draw the eye right in to the animal's head and maybe lightening up that just a little bit. But it's pretty simple and pretty graphic and pretty effective. The black and white image, Merging Crossroads, got third place. It's a very nice image. It's sharp, nice tones in it. I think obviously the focal point is the point where those tracks actually cross, and that's placed in a good sort of a power point, if you will, in the rule of thirds or the saddle point. My eye is let out of the top of the image a little bit. There's that light area in the top left, and the light top of the image is actually lighter than the foreground. I would tend to kind of put a gradient on that or a vignette and darken the edges, especially the top, and a little bit more contrast to kind of add a bit of pizzazz to the metal on the tracks would, I think, help it quite a bit. The image, Let Me Think About That, of the young lady, I gave second place to. It's an excellent image. It's sharp, proper depth of field, nice expression, good skin tones. The only thing I can think to possibly improve it would be to crop a little bit off the left to get rid of that kind of diagonal brace on the bench that she's sitting on. The one on the right doesn't sort of bother me too much. The one on the left kind of does for some reason, and I would tend to crop in on that just a little bit, and that would sort of move her a little bit off the center. She's got plenty of room to look into the picture then, and so that might improve it. But that's an excellent image. I like that. Which brings me to the winner, Morning in San Miguel de Allende. This is an excellent image. It's sharp, very colourful. I like the fact that the woman's cane is sort of leads your eye right up to her sort of face area. I like the fact that her right foot is sort of off the ground, sort of implying, some motion. It's an excellent image. A couple of things I can think of that might have improved it. That yellow patch at the extreme bottom left on the curb, if you could have desaturated that or darkened it in some way, make it a bit less distracting. And I also would have liked to have seen a little bit more of, the kind of context. We always say, move in closer for more impact and all that, but in this case, to see a little bit more of what she was walking along and more of that door, that might have improved the image a little bit. I don't know whether you took multiple shots at different focal lengths, but I'm sort of looking at this and I'm saying this is great, but I'm sort of looking for a bit more. But overall, I think it's an excellent shot. Technically, it's very good. gave an honourable mention to the image Bengal, which is a very nice portrait of the tiger. I think he's sharp. Enough of the animal is sharp where it needs to be. I think the composition is good. I like the expression. Background is not too distraction. I think the foreground is darkened to avoid a distraction there. So overall, that's a very pleasant sort of an image. The image Sunset, Unroll the Sleeping Bags, I awarded third place. A lot of impact here, very dramatic lighting, nice contrast. I especially like the fact that smaller peak on the left is separated nicely from the background. Peak, different shades of zone, looks like about zone 1 and zone 2 there. I like the reflection in the water. I think it's compositionally, it's very well done. It's a very pleasant position and well executed. I awarded second prize to the image Mesa Arch at Sunrise. Actually, this image and the previous one that I awarded third actually scored the same number of points, but I kind of fell in love with this image just a tiny bit more. Kind of anything from the southwest kind of floats my boat, so to speak. This, I think, is technically a 5. I mean, I know how hard it is to get these kind of shots and get the lighting without blowing things out. It's got excellent shadow and highlight detail, no color fringing, good separation of the hoodoos in the back, and just enough of the arch that we know where we are. I think this is an excellent image. And I gave first prize to the image I Want to Be a Model, the portrait of the young man. Again, this is a great image. It's very sharp. The background is nice, complements the clothing and the skin textures. I guess most teenagers would wish to have skin that great. Nice catch lights in the eye. The only issue I might with that, and it's kind of niggling a little bit, and I'm not a portrait expert by any means, but that patch of forearm in the extreme left bottom is a bit distracting. I don't know whether you would consider cropping that out. I don't know whether you put the eyes in the dead center of the frame deliberately for impact, or whether you would consider offsetting it to the left a little bit. Else maybe just darken down that corner a bit more. That sort of patch of forearm skin there is a little bit distracting to me, but otherwise it's an excellent image, and congratulations. Okay, now moving on to the Masters group. All of the images in this group are extremely high standard. I'm really impressed. I wish I could be this good. The first image I awarded a judge's choice to was the image 3 small sequoia. This is great lighting on this. I really like that, kind of filtered sunlight coming from left of camera. It's a very pleasant image. I had a hard time, kind of separating some of these images score-wise. I gave this 13 and perhaps a half points on this, so there were a lot of images of a very high standard. This one, I think the mood of that light, the soft kind of filtered light there, no blown highlights that I can see, good shadow detail. Technically it's very good. Thank you. I gave an honourable mention to the image, the teacher, a naughty image, isn't it? The very nice high-key portrait, high-key tone separation is great, skin tones are great, the lighting on the face. All in all, I think this, from impact and technically, I gave it both 5s. I think this is a great image. Third prize I gave to the image dancing in the fountain, with just maybe a half a point more than the previous image. As I said, they're all very close together. This one I really love, the impact and the mood and the expression in the girl and just her activity, and obviously the motion implied by her body position. I think it's fantastic use of the shutter speed to kind of capture all of the water droplets there. You can just sort of see how happy she is. If she'd have been running in from the right and looking left, this would have been a perfect 15. It's a little unfortunate. She's kind of a little bit stage right and looking out of the picture, but I guess you can't have everything, can you? The image Velvet Blue, I gave second prize to. Actually scored the same number of points as the previous, but I just thought that this one was just a half a point better, maybe. I really like this. I like the color palette. I like the receding mountains, the tones and the hills. I like the effect of the little lights in the little town down in the valley, and the silhouette of that elk there. It's an amazing shot. I hope it was not a composite. I don't be offended by that. I mean, it's just so serendipitous. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic image. And first prize I gave to the image Passing by Street Orphans in New Delhi. Again, this actually scored in my book the same number of points as the previous 2 images, but this one just had that certain extra. I think the engagement of the look on the 2 little urchins there. I think the fact that the foreground bleeds off into white is kind of an interesting approach, and it's very effective. I think it obviously frames the girl's head, and it focuses your attention down, which is kind of a paradox, isn't it? Normally you would sort of be drawn off, but the fact that it's an empty white space and there's so much going on in the foreground, I think it works extremely effectively. I like the little blue on the whatever it is it a lollipop or a spoon or something that the little boy is eating there? That is another kind of a paradox. Normally your attention is drawn to bright colours, and he's wearing a red jacket, but that bright blue kind of stands right out, contrasts nicely there. So there's a lot of interest in this image, a lot of message in the image as well, and I think it's an extremely effective image. It works very well, and congratulations. Okay, so just for some closing comments, I guess I was asked to kind of consider were there any standout images that did not place any award, and I guess there are 2 that I kind of remember. In the advanced group there was an image, Grubby Cherub, and also the image of Ed's Jeep. Those 2 images I think were kind of standouts. In the Masters group, the image of the rose, Ranunculus, is that the way you pronounce it? and also the Oriole bird photograph. I know how hard it is to get pictures of birds. I've tried often enough. And I think, again, with the rose, avoiding, blowing out reds, Nikons like I use, it's an excellent image and well composed. I think that's those two sort of 4 images, I guess, stand out in my mind. For the advanced and masters group, I don't know how the Dallas Camera Club sort of, defines a master separate and distinct from an advanced photographer. Given that, be that as it may, I would expect those photographers to have a given level of expertise both with the camera and in post. So I would expect no draining horizons or banana horizons, the old 18 to 200 sort of lens with a huge distortion with a banana shaped horizon. I'd expect no white balance issues, no exposure issues, no blown highlights or noise in shadows. I expect no chromatic aberrations, no sharpening artifacts. So, I think at that level you can be expected to be a master of your tools, including the camera, of course, and be able to present something that's technically competent, if not excellent. So anyway, I really appreciate the chance to do this. It was very enjoyable, very interesting, and I hope I didn't kind of upset anybody with my comments. I suppose I have always had this feeling that I was perhaps more negative than positive on some of the images, but my comments were all given in the context of maybe a helpful suggestion. I hope that my comments were consistent with the photographer's intention with the image. If my thoughts about the image were inconsistent with what you were trying to portray, then I guess basically we have a failure to communicate. And you can ask yourself, why is that? Was that because I just don't get it? Or is it because maybe your intentions were not clear enough and concise enough, for the viewer? Anyway, once again, thank you. And if I can, in final comment, make another plug for the Herd Nature Photography Contest. We'll be taking entries in January of next year, posting comment, the regulations, if you will, and the rules for the contest, probably in the late fall. So it's not too early to start looking at your nature images and consider entering the competition. Again, thank you very much.